Every person who has ever received great abundance felt the signs within themselves first, not in their bank book, not in the mouths of others, not in a telegram or a letter. First, there was a quiet change within, a gentle turning, a shift so subtle that had they not been attentive, they might have called it nothing at all. And yet, that inner shift was the true beginning of the miracle. I want you, as you listen to me now, to lay aside for a moment every concern about the outer world. Forget the numbers, the deadlines, the bills waiting on the table. Forget the opinions of men, the judgments of relatives, the so-called facts that seem to stand against you. Tonight, we are not dealing with facts. We are dealing with truth. Facts are shadows. Truth is cause. And the cause of every event in your world is found in only one place: your own wonderful human imagination. You did not arrive here by accident. You did not simply stumble into these words. Consciousness brought you. The same power that hung the stars, that set the currents of the sea, has drawn you to this moment because somewhere within you a question has ripened. You have grown weary of living at the mercy of conditions, and something in you is ready to know, what must change in me before my world changes? Tonight I speak to that part of you, not to the frightened self that counts coins and worries about tomorrow, but to the eternal self that says, I am, and knows itself to be the source of every appearance. I am not here to flatter you. I am here to remind you of who you are. Before money flows in, the shift is felt, not seen. Before abundance shows itself in figures and forms, it whispers in feeling. The world will tell you, when the money comes, then I will feel secure. Then I will feel free. Then I will relax. I tell you the reverse. When you feel secure, though nothing has yet changed. When you feel free, though no man has set you free. When you relax before the evidence appears, that is the sign that the tide has already turned within you. So as you listen, I ask you not merely to hear my words with the outer ear, but to feel them. Let them sink beneath the surface of reason, down into that deep, quiet place where you and I are one. I am not lecturing a crowd. I am conversing with your own being, that holy I am, which is the center of your life. For years, you have been trained to watch the outer world for signs. A letter in the post, a new position, a promise from a friend, a favorable report from the bank. And when nothing appears, you say, nothing is happening. But that is not where the story begins. The story begins in the invisible. The sign that you are finally ready is not that something out there moves, but that something in you becomes still. Have you noticed it? That strange softening of fear, even when nothing has changed? That peculiar calm that visits you for no earthly reason? You look at the same figures, the same circumstances, and yet a little voice inside says, it will be all right. You cannot explain why you feel it, but you feel it. My friend, that is the beginning of the shift. I have watched men and women for many years now. I have seen them struggle and strain, pray as beggars, affirm with their lips, while their hearts tremble. In that state, nothing moves. Effort born of fear simply multiplies fear. But I have also seen the moment when something in them yields, when they tire of pleading and fall into a simple, quiet knowing, when they cease to ask, will it happen, and instead rest in, of course it is done. That invisible relaxation, that inward surrender, is the true sign that money, opportunity, and so-called miracles are already on their way into form. Do not look then for signs in the sky. Look for them in your own chest. Tonight we are going to speak of that inner shift in the simplest possible language. You will come to recognize it, perhaps remember having felt it before some past blessing appeared in your life. You might recall that before the letter came, before the offer arrived, you had, for a brief moment, ceased to worry about it. You forgot to be anxious, and in that forgetting, the door opened. I stand before you as one who has tested this law, not as a preacher of theories. I have known what it is to count the last coins. I have known what it is to face conditions that seemed immovable. And yet I tell you, the outer wall falls when the inner position changes. The money does not make you secure. The feeling of security makes the money appear. So as we begin this journey together tonight, I want you to treat my words as a mirror. As I describe the signs of this inner shift, measure them against your own heart. Do not condemn yourself if you do not yet feel them. That is not the purpose. The purpose is to know what to look for within, so that when the signs arise, you may recognize them and rest in them, rather than running back to the old anxieties. Imagine, just for a moment, that all your striving could cease. Imagine that there is a way of being in which you no longer chase after supply, but stand quietly as the source. Imagine feeling, even now, a gentle assurance, as though some invisible hand had already written your story and written it well. If you can touch that feeling, if only faintly, you are touching the very heart of what we shall speak about. Do not be concerned with how long you have struggled. Do not say, I have tried so many times. All that matters is this moment. Consciousness is not counting years. It is asking only, what are you assuming now? What are you feeling now? For this present assumption, this present feeling, is the seed of your tomorrow. Tonight I will show you that every man who has moved from lack to abundance has walked through the same narrow gate. He has passed from fear into quiet, from begging into assuming, from watching the world to watching his own inner speech. The signs of this passage are universal. When you feel them in yourself, you may smile, for you will know, the thing I desire is already mine. I stand now at the beginning of its appearance. So sit quietly, if you can. Let the body grow comfortable. Allow the day's noise to fade. You have entered, for this hour, a different kind of room. Not a hall of argument, but a sanctuary of imagination. Here, we do not wait for the universe to decide whether you are ready. Here, you decide. And the first decision is simply this. You will give more weight to what you feel within than to what you see without. Before money flows in, the shift is felt, not seen. Remember that line, for it will return again and again as we go on. By the end of our time together, you will know precisely what that shift feels like, how to encourage it, how to rest in it. And when you feel it, you will not ask, will the money come? You will simply say, of course it must. For I, in consciousness, have already changed. There comes a moment in every man's life when he begins to sense a quiet shift within himself. It does not announce itself with thunder or trumpet. It does not come with fireworks, nor with any dramatic sensation. It comes softly, like a curtain being drawn in a dimly lit room. A subtle turning, a gentle reorientation of the inner self. If you are attentive, you will notice it. If you are not, it will still work in you, for it is the beginning of every true transformation. I have often said that the great change is not the change of circumstance, but the change of consciousness. And consciousness does not move with noise. When I speak of the inner turning, I am speaking of a shift so delicate, so silent, that many dismiss it as nothing. They expect some grand emotional explosion, some ecstatic revelation, and when it does not come, they say, nothing happened. But I tell you, the most powerful events in your life begin in stillness. This inner turning is the moment when your identity begins to loosen from the old and quietly attach itself to the new. It is the moment when you are no longer striving to become wealthy, but beginning to feel yourself as the one who already is. Not because your world shows it, but because your being begins to accept it. This turning is not effort. Effort belongs to the old state. When you are trying to visualize, trying to manifest, trying to force a feeling, you are still operating from lack. But when the turning begins, the effort drops away. You do not force yourself to think differently. You simply find, almost by surprise, that something in you no longer reacts as before. The mind does not race. The chest does not tighten. The breath does not rush. A gentler rhythm takes over. It is as though the soul itself exhales after having held its breath for years. Pay attention to this. One of the first signs that you have stepped into a new state is the disappearance of urgency. You stop chasing. You stop grasping. The frantic need to solve, to manage, to make things happen begins to fade. Something in you whispers, it is all right. It is already done. And you may wonder, why am I suddenly calm? Nothing has changed outside. But the truth is that everything has changed where it matters in you. You must understand the state of lack is tense. It is restless, impatient, full of pressure. It says, if I do not act now, I will lose everything. But the state of abundance is relaxed. It is unhurried, composed, assured. It does not rush, for it knows that all things come to it. When the shift occurs, you begin to feel this ease long before the world reflects it. Let me say something plainly. This quietness is not laziness, but spiritual evidence. It is the evidence that your consciousness has already turned toward the new identity. You are not drifting, you are aligning. When you were living from lack, your entire being was strained. But now, without effort, without command, that strain dissolves. You are no longer pulling at life. Life begins to move toward you. This is why I tell those who come to me, watch the inner signs, not the outer conditions. For a man may still see an empty purse and yet feel no fear. He may still hear a creditor's voice and yet remain calm. He may still look upon numbers that once terrified him and feel a strange detachment. That detachment is the sign, that quietness is the shift. You have ceased to identify with the old state. Think of it this way. If you place a seed in the ground, nothing appears to happen at first. There is no noise, no movement, no visible sign. But deep below, hidden from the eye, life begins its quiet work. The seed splits. Roots begin to form. The old shell dissolves. And if you judged only by surface appearance, you would say nothing is happening. But the gardener knows better. He knows that the absence of movement above is not an absence of progress. It is the first stage of growth. So it is with you. The quietness you feel is the breaking of the old shell, the dissolving of the old identity, the forming of a new root. If you were to search outwardly for signs at this stage, you would be like the impatient man who digs up the seed each morning to check its progress. You would interrupt the very process that would bless you. Allow the quietness to deepen. Allow the gentleness to grow. When you notice that you are less tense, less reactive, less frightened, not because circumstances improved, but because you improved, that is the first true sign that money is preparing to flow into your life. You have left the state of striving and entered the state of being. The great inner turning is silent, but it is the most powerful moment in your creation. For once the identity shifts, the world must follow. It has no choice. The world is only an echo of the self, and when the self changes its tone, the echo changes with it. If, as you listen, you feel even the slightest calm enter your body, even the faintest sense of release, even a small moment where the tension loosens its grip, acknowledge it. That is the seed beginning to open. That is the first movement of the new state. That is the whisper of wealth approaching, not from the horizon outside, but from the depths within. This quietness, this subtle turning, is the first sure sign, and once it begins, nothing can stop the manifestation that follows. One of the clearest signs that a man has not yet assumed the state he desires is his constant need to check the outer world for proof. He examines the world the way a physician examines a patient, touching here, checking there, waiting for some external symptom to confirm an internal shift. And yet the law does not work that way. The world is not the cause, it is the effect. The world is not the seed, it is the fruit. And no amount of checking the fruit will tell you whether the seed has taken root. I have seen people check their bank books 3, 4, 10 times a day, hoping to see some miraculous change in the figures. I have watched them study every letter that arrives, every conversation, every small coincidence, as though salvation might hide behind a single envelope or phrase. And with every check, every search, every anxious scan of the world outside, they reveal the same truth. They have not yet believed within. You must understand this. The habit of checking is born of doubt. It is the behavior of one who secretly fears nothing has changed, and so he looks outward for reassurance. But abundance does not come to the one who doubts. It comes to the one who knows. The man who knows does not check, and his refusal to check is not negligence. It is faith. When the shift has truly occurred within you, when you have assumed the feeling of already having what you desire, a strange and beautiful thing happens. You stop looking for signs. You no longer look out there because you have seen within. You no longer ask the world to reassure you. because your inner world is already full. Let me tell you of a student I once knew. He came to my lectures for many months, always with the same question. Neville, how can I know it's working? He would imagine wealth for a few minutes at night, but then spend his entire day checking his accounts. He would visit the bank nearly every afternoon, asking the same clerk whether any new deposits had arrived. He would open his ledger repeatedly, as if the numbers might change simply because he stared at them hard enough. One evening, after a lecture, he approached me with frustration in his eyes. He said, "I'm doing everything you say, and yet nothing moves." I looked at him and asked gently, "How many times today did you check your balance?" He hesitated, embarrassed. "6 times, he said. "Perhaps 7. I said to him, "My friend, that is not faith. That is fear disguised as vigilance. You are searching the shadow for the light. You are asking the mirror to change before the face has changed. That is impossible." He stood silent for a moment and then said, "Then, what should I do?" And I answered, "Stop checking. Stop looking for evidence. Walk as though you already have it. Let the outer world catch up to the inner one." He struggled with this instruction, as many do, but he tried. He stopped visiting the bank each afternoon. He stopped opening his ledger repeatedly. He stopped scanning his environment for signs that his desire was coming. Instead, he began practicing the feeling of already being the man he wanted to be. And something remarkable occurred. Within days, he noticed a lightness in his body, a calm he had never felt before. The tension that had once driven him to check constantly had dissolved. Weeks later, he told me, "Neville, I forgot to look. I forgot to check." And I smiled, for that forgetfulness was the sign. When he no longer cared whether the outer world had changed, the inner world had already shifted. And shortly after this inner transformation, an opportunity arose. An unexpected partnership that brought him the very financial freedom he had been seeking. But the opportunity did not appear until he stopped searching for it could not appear as long as he was anchored in doubt. I want you to hear this clearly. The outer senses report only the past. They show you what you have previously assumed, previously felt, previously accepted as true. Your senses are historians, not prophets. They can only reveal what has been impressed upon them by yesterday's state. And yet, most men treat the senses as though they were windows into the future, constantly asking, "Has it changed yet? Has it come yet?" But the senses cannot tell you what is coming. They can only echo what has been. And so long as you rely on them for reassurance, you remain chained to the past. The world you see today is not your tomorrow. It is your yesterday made visible. When you understand this, you stop consulting the senses for guidance. You stop checking the world to see if your desire is on its way. Instead, you return again and again to the only place where the future can ever be formed within. You cultivate the feeling of already having what you desire. You dwell in the inner certainty that it is done. And when that feeling becomes natural, when it becomes your new home, you lose interest in checking the world outside. You will know you have entered the state of abundance, not when money arrives, but when the urge to look for it fades. Not when the numbers rise, but when your attention rises above the numbers. When you no longer ask the world to prove anything to you, it is because your soul has already accepted the truth. This is the second sign. When you stop checking, you are already there. There comes a moment, quiet, inexplicable, delicate, when peace descends upon you for no earthly reason. It arrives not because a problem has been solved, not because a debt has been paid, not because some letter brought good news. No, it comes while the outer world still looks exactly as it did yesterday, perhaps even worse. And yet inside you a soft calm begins to spread, like warm light filling a dark room. This is the third sign, the strange peace before the breakthrough. It is a peace that does not make sense. It contradicts the senses. It defies the facts. And yet it is more real than the facts themselves. Scripture calls it the peace that passeth all understanding. Why does it pass understanding? Because understanding belongs to reason. And this peace does not come from reason. It comes from assumption. It comes from knowing, not hoping, not wishing, not bargaining, but knowing that the thing you desire is already yours in consciousness. When that knowing takes root, peace follows. Peace is the shadow cast by fulfilled desire. Let me explain this peace as I have seen it in myself and in countless others. Long before the manifestation arrives, long before the check, the opportunity, the open door, there is a quiet shift inside. You find yourself breathing more easily. You find the mind growing softer. The frantic searching relaxes. The sense of urgency fades. And you say to yourself, everything is all right, even when nothing external has changed. People around you may wonder, how can you be so calm? They may even accuse you of being irresponsible, unrealistic, careless with your life. But you are not careless. You are certain. You have touched the end within yourself, and now you live from it. And because you live from it, the outer world must bend to match the inner one. There is a moment in Scripture when the disciples are caught in a violent storm. The wind rages, the waves rise, and they fear for their lives. And where is the Christ? Asleep, asleep in the midst of chaos. Not because he is unaware, but because he knows who he is. He knows the power within. He knows the storm cannot touch him unless he consents. And from this knowing flows that unshakable peace. This story is not about a man sleeping in a boat. It is about your own consciousness. When you know the truth of your desire, when you know it as already fulfilled, you rest. You rest even when the storm outside growls. You rest because the inner state is settled. And that inner stillness, that calm in the face of contradictory evidence, is the clearest sign that your manifestation is near. I have seen this peace descend upon men who had no logical reason to feel it. One man, who had been burdened by debt for years, told me, "Neville, I woke this morning and felt as though the weight had lifted. The debts are still there, but I feel free." And within weeks, the means appeared to clear his obligations. Another woman, who longed for financial security, found herself smiling at nothing in particular. "Something in me feels done," she said. And shortly after, she received what she needed, through channels she could never have foreseen. This is always the order: peace first, manifestation second. Never the reverse. You cannot wait for the world to bring you peace. You must bring peace to the world. And so tonight, for a moment, I want you to taste this peace. Not imagine it vaguely, but feel it as though it were already rising in your chest. Sit quietly if you can. Let your shoulders drop. Let the breath soften. Now ask yourself gently, how would I feel if my financial life were already solved? Do not answer with words. Answer with sensation. Would you feel light? Would your chest expand? Would your brow relax? Would you breathe more deeply, without effort? Would there be a softness in your stomach, a loosening in your spine? Let that feeling rise. Let it move through you. Let it settle into your body, as though it belonged there, because it does. You are not pretending. You are revealing the natural state of one who already has what he desires. Now imagine, just for a few seconds, that every bill is paid, that you have more than enough, that you wake in the morning knowing that money flows to you easily, naturally, in ways you do not need to orchestrate. Imagine the relief, not excitement, not frenzy, but relief. That warm, deep exhale of "it is done." Feel that for a moment. That sensation, soft, steady, effortless, is the peace that precedes your manifestation. It does not shout. It does not leap. It simply rests. It rests because it knows. And when you touch this peace, even briefly, you have touched the state from which abundance flows. You have entered the Sabbath in consciousness. And the Sabbath is not a day. It is the inner conviction that creation is finished. When this peace becomes natural, when it becomes your home, you will no longer ask, when will it come? For you will realize something far greater. It has already come. Now the world is merely catching up. That is the peace before the breakthrough. And if you feel even a trace of it now, take it as a sacred sign. Your world is already beginning to change. There comes a point in your inner transformation when the opinions of others fall away like dry leaves from a tree. Not through rebellion, not through defiance, but through a quiet and profound knowing. When a man has truly assumed the wish fulfilled, he no longer looks to others to approve, confirm, or validate his desire. He no longer needs the world to say, "Yes, you are right." His inner world has already spoken the only yes that matters. This is the fourth sign. When people's doubts no longer touch you, you must understand that those who question your vision, who warn you, who fear for you, are not malicious. They simply speak from their own state. A man who doubts himself must doubt you. A woman who cannot imagine abundance for herself will not imagine it for another. They are not speaking of your limitations. They are revealing their own. Before the shift occurs, you may feel the need to explain yourself. You may find yourself defending your desire, justifying it, repeating it aloud, in hopes that someone will say, "I believe in you." This is natural when the inner conviction is still tender, still fragile. But once the inner state becomes solid, once abundance feels like your home, you will notice something extraordinary. You stop talking about it, not because you're hiding it, not because you're afraid of others' opinions, but because the desire feels complete within you. It no longer needs to be spoken. It simply is. I recall a woman who once came to my lectures, a woman of tremendous sincerity. She longed for financial freedom, but every time she shared her desire with her family, they dismissed her. They told her she was foolish, unrealistic, irresponsible. And so she talked more, argued more, defended more, hoping that one day they might understand. But their lack of understanding was not the problem. Her need for it was. One evening after a lecture, she approached me and said, "Neville, I don't know why, but I'm growing exhausted. I'm tired of explaining myself." And I said to her, "Good. That exhaustion is not defeat, it is birth. You are shedding the old reliance on others' opinions." She looked puzzled, and I told her, "When you truly assume the state of your desire, you will no longer speak of it. You will no longer defend it. You will simply live from it." A few weeks later, she returned with a softness in her expression I had not seen before. She said, "Neville, something has changed. When my sister questioned me yesterday, when she warned me not to get my hopes up, I felt nothing. Not anger, not fear, not defensiveness. I only felt calm, and I smiled, for that calm was the sign." I asked her, "Did you reply?" She said, "No, I didn't need to." And I told her, "Of course, you do not defend truth when you are the truth." It was not that she refused to speak. It was that she had no desire to. Her inner world was now full. She did not need to harvest approval from others. And soon after this inner shift, everything in her outer world followed. Within a short time, she received an unexpected opportunity, an inheritance, not enormous, but enough to place her firmly in the feeling she had already claimed. And with that foundation, more and more avenues opened. Her manifestation did not come because others finally believed in her. It came because she no longer needed them to. When the shift has occurred, you will notice this same change in yourself. Conversations that once triggered doubt will fall harmlessly at your feet. Words that once stirred fear will simply dissolve before they reach your heart. The criticism of others will sound distant, like echoes from a room you no longer occupy. You will understand that every man speaks from his own assumption, his own state of consciousness. And so, when someone doubts you, you do not take it personally. You simply recognize this is the state they live in. And because you no longer seek approval, their doubts cannot disturb your peace. This is the sign. This is how you know you have entered the state. When the world's opinions no longer sway you, you have found your center. When other people's voices grow soft compared to the voice within, you have awakened. And when you no longer defend your desire, it is because the desire is already fulfilled in you. This is the quiet mastery that precedes all manifestation, the inner knowing that needs nothing from the world, because it has already claimed everything within. There is a moment in every transformation when the mind begins to speak in a new tongue. Not through effort, not through discipline, not through forced repetition, but through a natural and almost unnoticed shift in inner speech. This is one of the clearest and most reliable signs that you have entered a new state of consciousness. Your inner dialogue changes without your trying to change it. When a man lives in the state of lack, he does not need to affirm it. He does not need to repeat it aloud. His inner speech rehearses lack automatically. He imagines conversations where he apologizes. He imagines being unable to pay. He constructs explanations, excuses, defenses. He prepares for disappointment long before it arrives. This is not deliberate. It is habitual. It is the natural speech of the state he occupies. But when abundance has been assumed, genuinely assumed, the inner language alters of its own accord. You will find yourself speaking to yourself in a new way. You will notice that the mind no longer constructs stories of loss or fear. You no longer rehearse poverty in advance. You no longer imagine explaining why you cannot afford something. And the reason is simple. You are no longer the one who must explain. You are no longer living in that state. There was a man who once came to me, worn down by years of self-defeat. He told me, "Neville, I cannot stop imagining the worst. No matter how hard I try, I picture myself failing, struggling, apologizing." I told him gently, "You do not have a problem with imagination. You have a problem with identity. A new identity has new speech. Change the state, and the speech changes on its own." He did not understand at first. Like many, he believed he had to correct every negative thought individually, wrestle every fearful image to the ground, discipline himself into better conversations. But this is not the law. This is struggle. And struggle comes from the belief that you must do the work yourself. I told him, "Do not try to fix the inner speech. Assume a new state, and the inner speech will fix itself." A few weeks later, he returned to me with an expression of bewildered relief. "Neville," he said, "something strange has happened. I am no longer imagining myself explaining to my landlord why I cannot pay rent. Instead, I hear myself saying, 'Yes, I've taken care of it.' I feel as though I'm speaking from the other side of the problem." And I said, "Of course. Your inner speech is the barometer of your state. The conversation you hear within tells you who you believe yourself to be." He thought for a moment and then said, "The old conversations feel foreign now. I can't seem to return to them." And I told him, "You cannot speak the language of the past when you no longer live in it. A man in a new land does not speak the old dialect. Your inner speech reveals your assumption more clearly than any affirmation, any visualization, any emotional outburst. The words you hear in the privacy of your mind, those quiet, spontaneous, unguarded phrases, are the purest reflection of the state you have entered. When the shift has occurred, you will notice you no longer imagine pleading. You no longer imagine explaining. You no longer imagine worry-filled conversations. You no longer imagine others doubting you, questioning you, or pitying you. You begin instead to hear conversations of assurance, of ease, of quiet confidence. You hear yourself responding calmly, as one who already has. You hear yourself making decisions from abundance, not reacting from lack. You feel yourself standing in a position of having, not chasing. You do not force these conversations. They arise spontaneously because the inner man has changed. I tell you now, as plainly as Scripture itself declares, your inner speech is the barometer of your state. You can know where you live, where you truly live, by listening to the whispering within. If you hear lack, you live in lack. If you hear abundance, you live in abundance. And when your inner speech shifts into the language of fulfillment, it is because the fulfillment has already been assumed in consciousness. And once assumed, it must externalize itself, for the outer world is only the shadow cast by the inner word. This shift in inner speech is not the manifestation itself, but it is the echo of the new state. And every echo proves a voice. Every voice proves a speaker. And every speaker speaks from the state he inhabits. When your inner speech has changed, your world has no choice but to follow. There comes a moment in every true assumption when the mind releases its tight grip on the question that has tormented humanity for centuries. How will it happen? This surrender is not resignation. It is not carelessness. It is not passivity. It is the quiet, elegant act of stepping aside so that the deeper intelligence within you may move freely. And this exquisite relinquishment of the mechanism, the method, the pathway, is the sixth sign. When you stop trying to orchestrate the miracle finally has room to breathe. I have watched men and women delay their own manifestations for months, even years, by insisting not consciously, not maliciously, but insistently, that life must deliver their desire through a very particular doorway. They outline strategies, imagine specific routes, cling to certain ideas of how it must unfold, and in doing so, they choke the very flow that would have brought them what they wanted in far simpler, cleaner, and more graceful ways. Let me tell you of a man who illustrated this perfectly. He had the desire to accumulate a large sum of money to begin a project he had dreamed of for decades. There was no doubt in him about the desire. That part was alive, vivid, and sincere. But his imagination was rigid. He insisted the money could only come through one channel. He imagined the same scenario, night after night, seeing himself win a particular investment, earn a specific opportunity, or be granted money from one single source. He clung to this path as though it were the desire itself, and each morning he would wake and look for evidence through that one channel only. And when the evidence did not show, he grew frustrated, confused, and quietly defeated. He came to me one evening after a lecture and said, "Neville, I have followed your teaching exactly. I see the money coming to me, but it never arrives." I asked him, "My friend, do you imagine the money or do you imagine the route?" He looked startled. "Is there a difference?" he asked. "There is all the difference in the world," I told him. "The moment you dictate the means, you interfere with the wisdom of your own consciousness." He did not understand. So I said it to him plainly, "You must never concern yourself with the how. The how belongs to the state you have assumed. It knows the way. Your only task is to feel the wish fulfilled." I could see resistance forming in him. "But if I do not know how it will come," he said, "how will I know what to do?" "You will be moved," I said calmly. "Moved by impulses you cannot predict. Moved by desires that arise effortlessly within you. Moved by people who appear at the right moment. Moved by circumstances orchestrated in ways too perfect to be the product of your logic." And then I said to him the words that finally reached him. "Your consciousness knows ways the mind cannot conceive, for the mind is limited to memory, to past experiences, to patterns it has already witnessed. But consciousness, the true self, the I am, has access to possibilities the mind has never tasted." A few days later, he returned, quieter now, not defeated, but contemplative. "Very well," he said. "I will stop imagining how it comes. I will only imagine that it has come." He sat that night in his chair, still, and surrendered. He did not force anything. He did not try to manufacture feelings. He asked himself one simple question: how would I feel if I had it already? And he sat in the warmth of that feeling. He let it fill his chest, his breath, his very presence. He let the tension he had carried for so long dissolve. And when he rose from that chair, he told me he was surprised to feel something unfamiliar. He no longer cared about how. He no longer clung to the channels he had once worshipped. The desire felt done. The means felt irrelevant. This is surrender, not passive waiting, but active knowing. Within a short time, life responded, not through the channel he had demanded, not through the scenario he had rehearsed, but through an entirely unexpected path, one he had never imagined, and one that suited him better than anything his mind could have contrived. A distant relative he had not spoken to in years reached out to him about a business idea. They spoke. A partnership formed. The financial means he needed flowed in with such ease that he wrote to me afterwards saying, "Neville, it came through a door I didn't even know existed." And I answered him, "Exactly. The mind knew nothing of that door, but your consciousness did." You must understand this deeply. When you dictate the how, you are telling infinite intelligence that it must fit within the confines of your limited reason. You are attempting to compress the power that created the world into the narrow channels your past has allowed you to imagine. This is why so many struggle. They assume the desire, yes, but they wrap it in chains of logic and call it faith. They say, "I believe I will receive it, but only if it comes this particular way." This is not faith. This is fear dressed as control. Faith is the willingness to let go of the mechanism. Faith is trusting that the end contains its own means. Faith is knowing that once you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, life itself reorganizes around that assumption. You need not interfere. You need not control. You need not strategize. You need not manipulate. The seed does not need your help to grow. The flower does not need instruction to bloom. The sun does not require your guidance to rise. All creation springs forth naturally from the state you occupy. When you have truly assumed abundance, you will find that the mind grows quiet around questions of how. You will no longer feel the need to plan. You will no longer obsess over the path. You will no longer attempt to force the outcome into a particular shape. Instead, you will feel the exquisite relief of knowing it is already done. This is the sign. When you release the how, it is because the end is already alive within you. When you no longer chase the mechanics, it is because the state has already taken root. When you feel no urgency to manipulate circumstances, it is because you understand that circumstances are the shadows of your assumption, not the architects of it. This surrender is sovereignty. This resting is power. This letting go is creation. Your consciousness knows ways the mind cannot conceive, and it will lead you perfectly, gently, unfailingly, the moment you step aside and allow it to work through you. That winter in New York remains one of the clearest revelations of my life, not because of the journey itself, nor even because of the remarkable way the ticket arrived, but because of the feeling that took hold of me long before anything in the outer world changed. It was a sensation I had not known before, a deep, immovable certainty, a knowing so complete that the physical event, when it finally unfolded, felt almost secondary, almost anticlimactic, as though it were merely catching up to a truth that had already been established in the unseen. I want to walk you through that experience slowly, not to repeat the story as many have heard it, but to make you feel the inner shift that preceded every physical event. It was winter. The cold was sharp, unforgiving, the kind that slices into the bones and lingers. New York can be brutal in those months, especially when one has little money and no clear prospects. I longed deeply for Barbados, for the warmth, for the sea, for the comfort of home. But longing is not enough. Many long, few assume. One evening, with the wind pressing against the windows of my small room, I went to see Abdullah. I told him plainly, I want to go to Barbados this winter, but I have no means. He looked at me with that expression he often wore, a blend of sternness and compassion, and he said something that shook me. You are in Barbados. I laughed. Abdullah, how can I be in Barbados when I can see the snow and feel the cold? And he replied, more firmly, you are in Barbados. Walk as though you are there. Sleep as though you are there. Live from Barbados, not toward it. His instruction was simple, but radical. Do not think of the desire. Think from the desire. That night, I went home and did exactly what he said. I closed my eyes and imagined myself standing in my father's house in Barbados. I felt the warm breeze passing through the room. I smelt the salt in the air. I heard the sound of the sea through the open window. I felt the polished wood beneath my bare feet. I made it so vivid that I could not tell whether I was imagining it or remembering it. I did not imagine leaving New York. I did not imagine receiving money. I did not imagine the journey. I imagined only the end. I am in Barbados. And then something happened, quietly, gently, without spectacle. A knowing settled into me. It was not excitement. It was not hope. It was not anticipation. It was certainty. A certainty so complete, it felt like a physical weight in my chest, but a pleasant one, like a warm stone resting over the heart. I remember sitting upright in my bed after that first night of assumption and realizing that something was different. I was no longer asking, will I go? The question had dissolved. I was no longer wondering when the means would appear. The means were irrelevant. I was in Barbados, consciously, inwardly, truthfully. The physical body was still in New York, yes. The snow was still on the streets, yes. My pockets were still nearly empty, yes. But none of these outer facts had any power, because I was already there where I wanted to be. From that day onward, I never again asked Ab, when will it happen? He would have smiled at the foolishness of the question. A man who knows does not ask when, and the certainty grew. Day after day, I would lie in my room, close my eyes, and stand again in my father's house. I slept each night in Barbados. I walked the streets of New York with the inner gait of a man strolling along the beaches of St. Michael. I bought food from the market with the inward leisure of a man who had no winter to fear. I had no interest in the mechanism. I had no curiosity about how it would all come about, because when the assumption is complete, the how becomes unimportant. Days passed, then weeks. The cold pressed harder. The money did not come. No opportunities appeared. Nothing moved outwardly. And yet my certainty did not waver, not once, not for a moment, because the manifestation had already occurred where it must occur first, in consciousness. And then, after nearly 3 weeks, the outer world surrendered. A letter arrived, a simple envelope addressed in my brother's handwriting. Inside it was a ticket, a steamship ticket to Barbados for that very winter. And with it, a note: "We must all be together for Christmas. You must come home." I remember the moment vividly, not because I was shocked, but because I was not. The physical event felt merely like the natural unfolding of what I had already accepted within. I opened the letter with the calm of a man reading yesterday's news. I smiled, not at the ticket, but at the precision of consciousness. I went to see Abdullah that evening. I held the letter and the ticket before him. He did not congratulate me. He did not marvel. He simply said, "I told you, you were in Barbados." And that is the truth. The certainty itself was the manifestation. The ticket was only the echo. You must understand this with your whole being. When the assumption is complete, when you feel the state as real, when you rest in it without effort, everything in the outer world moves to support it. People are compelled. Letters are written. Opportunities emerge. The world reconfigures itself, not because you forced it to, but because you were already the one you desired to be. Before the ticket arrived, I no longer cared about signs. I no longer cared about appearances. I no longer cared about whether conditions looked favorable. Why? Because I had already shifted. And once the inner shift is real, the outer must obey. The true manifestation is the certainty. The physical form is simply the bridge. The world must cross to reflect the truth of your assumption. This is what it feels like. When the assumption is complete, it feels finished, even when nothing physical has changed. It feels familiar, as though you are remembering, not imagining. It feels natural, without excitement or strain. It feels inevitable. There is no more hoping, no more waiting, no more doubting, no more checking. You are there, and the world must meet you there. That certainty is the manifestation. And when you feel it, your desire is not coming, it has already come. There is a subtle distinction that changes the entire direction of a man's life. And until he learns it, not intellectually, but through living experience, he will walk in circles, imagining much and receiving little. It is the difference between thinking of the end and thinking from the end. Many hear the words, many repeat them, but few understand them, and fewer still practice them. Yet this single distinction is the line between delay and fulfillment, between desire and attainment, between waiting and receiving. To think of the end is to place your desire at a distance, to see it as something external, something apart from you, something you are moving toward someday. Thinking of always implies separation, a future, a gap between where you stand and where your blessing waits. It is the talk of tomorrow, the language of hope, the posture of the seeker. It is imagining what you want as though it were not yours yet. It is looking at the promised land from across the river. It is dreaming from the outside. But to think from the end, that is an entirely different world. Thinking from is possession. It is embodiment. It is identification. It is the state of already having, already being, already living from the fulfillment. Thinking from is the psychological act of stepping into the wish fulfilled as though it were the most natural thing in the world. It is not spectatorship. It is participation. It is consciousness wearing the garment of the accomplished fact. When you think from the end, you do not visualize the money coming. You feel the relief of having it. You do not imagine the letter arriving. You imagine reading it. You do not picture the phone ringing with good news. You imagine having already received the good news. You walk, speak, breathe, and decide from the standpoint of the man who already owns the thing he once sought. And because consciousness determines experience, the world must move to reflect that inner standpoint. Let me give you a simple example from daily life, something so ordinary, yet so revealing. Suppose you lose a key in your home. You know the key exists. You know it must be somewhere. You search the kitchen, the pocket of a coat, the drawer near the door. When you finally find it, notice the feeling. Notice how natural it feels to hold it. You are not excited. You are relieved. The moment before finding it, you were thinking of the key. The moment after finding it, you were thinking from the end. You were in the state of possession. That is all manifestation is, the movement from thinking of to thinking from, the inner click from uncertainty to certainty. Or consider a letter you expect. Before it arrives, you think of the letter. You imagine the possibility that it may come today, perhaps tomorrow. You feel the anticipation, the waiting, the hope. But once it arrives, once it is in your hand, you no longer think of it. You think from it. You are already in possession of the outcome. And possession, inner possession, is what creates the outer event. When you think from the end, you collapse the time between desire and fulfillment. The blessing, which once seemed far off, suddenly stands here, in the present. For consciousness does not move through time. Consciousness creates time. And when consciousness occupies the state of already having, the rest of the world must follow. Thinking of delays the blessing. Thinking from brings the blessing now. You may say, but how do I know if I am thinking of or thinking from? The answer is beautifully simple. Feel your reactions. Feel your body. Feel your breath. Feel your inner tone. If you are thinking of the end, you feel anticipation, longing, or effort. You feel a reaching, a leaning forward, a desire tinged with lack. You may feel excitement, but excitement is unstable. It is the emotion of almost not already. Thinking of still contains the vibration of distance. But when you think from the end, you feel relief. You feel quiet. You feel complete. You feel done. You feel natural. You feel as though nothing needs to hurry, nothing needs to change, nothing needs to be pushed or arranged. You walk with the calm of a man who knows, not hopes, not wishes, not requests, but knows that all is well. Thinking from produces a bodily stillness, a settledness, a gentle confidence. It produces the sense that the world is already perfect, already aligned, already supportive. Thinking from removes urgency. It removes struggle. It replaces wanting with being. Let us enter a small micro scene together. A simple, direct experience of thinking. Close your eyes for a moment in your imagination, and do not watch the scene as though it were happening to someone else. Step inside it. Become it. Imagine that you are sitting at a table, perhaps in the quiet of the early morning, and you open your banking ledger, or whatever represents your private financial world. And as you open it, you see a large balance, something far greater than what your senses presently report. Instead of thinking of money arriving, imagine the sensation of possession. Imagine the warmth in your chest when you realize you are secure, that you have more than enough, that the worry which followed you for years has dissolved into nothingness. Imagine breathing differently, slowly, deeply, freely. Feel the weight on your shoulders lifting. Feel how your entire body softens. You are not imagining the money coming. You are imagining the effect of already having it. This is thinking from, in this state, you are not waiting for money. You are living as the one who already has it. And that shift, that internal shift, is the true manifestation. The world will only echo it. The world will only play the part assigned to it by your assumption. Thinking from the end is the inner rotation of identity. It is not about forcing images. It is about accepting a new psychological atmosphere. It is not about struggling to believe. It is about entering a feeling so naturally that it feels like remembering. When the desire becomes a memory instead of a hope, you know you have crossed the line. Many of my students struggled because they spent their nights visualizing as though the desired world were still far away. They pictured themselves receiving money, instead of picturing themselves as already having money. They thought of the end, not from the end. And until that distinction was understood, they walked in a circle of effort. But once they practiced the shift, once they relaxed into the inner state of having, their world changed with astonishing ease. Opportunities appeared where none existed. People behaved in ways that supported them. Letters arrived. Doors opened, not by force, but by natural unfolding. The world was merely reflecting their new inner residence. Thinking from is living resurrection. You resurrect the man you wish to be, and you walk in him, sleep in him, breathe in him, until he becomes the only version of yourself you recognize, and the outer world, seeing no contradiction, conforms. Now listen to this carefully, for it is the key. You cannot think from the end while holding on to the feelings of the old state. You cannot think from abundance while fearing poverty. You cannot think from security while rehearsing worry. The inner tone reveals your state more than the images you draw in your mind. The tone, the feeling, is what places you in the new world. Let us return once more to the micro scene. Imagine again the sensation of having money now, not tomorrow, not soon, not someday. Now, imagine the ease that fills your body. Imagine letting out a breath you did not realize you were holding. Imagine saying to yourself, in the privacy of your mind, it is done. It has already happened. Notice how the statement softens you. Notice how it unties something inside you. That softening, that unwinding, is the doorway into thinking. From. You do not need to maintain this feeling with effort. You only need to touch it fully, sincerely, a few moments at a time. Every time you touch it, every time you immerse yourself in it, you reinforce the new state. You build the inner habit of identity, and soon, without struggle, without planning, without strain, you will find that the feeling follows you throughout the day. You begin living from the end habitually. And when you live from the end, your world cannot help but follow. Thinking at a distance keeps the desire away. Thinking from closes the distance. In truth, it erases it entirely, for the distance never existed except in consciousness, and consciousness dissolves all imaginary separation. The moment you accept the end as present reality, this is why I say, thinking of delays the blessing, thinking from collapses time. When the end is accepted as now, time bends its knee. Circumstances rearrange themselves. People become conduits. Events unfold in perfect sequence. And what once seemed impossible begins to feel inevitable. The moment you think from the end, the manifestation is already underway. The rest is simply the outer world catching up to your inner knowing. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when the battle ends. Not because you have won it, not because you have defeated your doubts with sheer force, but because you have simply stopped feeding them. The old self does not die with drama or noise. It does not collapse in a blaze of effort or heroic struggle. It dissolves by starvation. It fades because you no longer give it your attention, your energy, your belief. And when this dissolution begins, you feel it not as excitement, but as a peculiar stillness. For years, people have come to me saying, Neville, I keep arguing with my old thoughts. I keep wrestling with my fears. I keep trying to overpower the voice that tells me I cannot have what I want. And I always tell them the same thing. You do not overcome the old state by fighting it. You leave it by abandoning it. You walk away from it quietly, just as you would walk away from a room you no longer wish to occupy. You do not need to push down the walls. You simply stop living in that place. And the moment you turn your attention elsewhere, that room begins to fade from your experience. When a man has truly assumed a new state, when he has entered a new inner world, he no longer argues with the old one. Why would he? A king does not argue with the memories of the beggar he once was. A wealthy man does not debate with the thoughts of a poor man. A loved man does not negotiate with the loneliness that belonged to another life. Once the state is accepted, the old identity loses all authority. This is one of the clearest signs that the shift has occurred. Your inner arguments stop. The struggle falls away. You no longer feel compelled to correct yourself every 5 minutes. No longer feel the need to fight off doubt or to justify your desire. You stop trying to prove, even to yourself, that your new state is real. You simply live in it. You see, the old state can only survive through your involvement. It requires your attention. It requires your emotional participation. It requires your willingness to fight with it, to try to fix it, to try to silence it. Every time you argue with a negative thought, you feed it. Every time you say, I must get rid of this belief, you strengthen it. Resistance is nourishment. Struggle is fuel. But when the shift takes place, when you truly enter the new state, the old thoughts arise like faint echoes. They drift through you without friction, without reaction, without meaning. You hear them, the way you might hear a distant conversation in a room you are no longer in. They no longer belong to you. They no longer fit. They no longer hook into your emotions. They feel like relics from a different life. I once spoke with a woman who had battled with herself for years. She wanted wealth, but her old beliefs constantly rose up to haunt her. She would visualize abundance at night, and the next morning find herself arguing with memories of debt, comparing herself to others, defending her desire to her own mind. She told me, "Neville, I am exhausted from fighting these thoughts." I said to her, "Stop fighting. Fighting keeps them alive. Instead, turn toward the feeling of already having what you desire, and the old inner voices will starve." She didn't understand at first. She believed effort was the path. She believed struggle was progress. She believed force was strength. But effort, struggle, and force belong to the state of lack. They cannot take you into the new state. Weeks later, she returned with a softness in her voice. "Neville, something strange has happened. It's as if the old me has fallen silent. The thoughts still appear sometimes, but they feel distant, weak, almost powerless." And I told her, of course they do. The war is over, because the soldier has left the battlefield. This is what it feels like when you no longer argue with your old self. There is a lightness, a quiet knowing. There is a sense of being pulled forward, instead of needing to push. There is a recognition that the old identity has no authority anymore. There is a peace that comes from inhabiting a new psychological home. You are no longer trying to convince yourself of anything. You simply are. You are the wealthy one. You are the secure one. You are the provided for one. You live from the state quietly, naturally, as though it were the most reasonable thing in the world. You are no longer performing belief. You are being it. Let me tell you something deeply true. The old self does not collapse because the new self is stronger. It collapses because the new self is accepted. Acceptance is far more powerful than effort. Acceptance is final. Once a man accepts a new identity, his old identity becomes hollow, empty, without substance, and he no longer fights with emptiness. When the shift becomes natural, when the new state feels like home, the old reactions simply do not arise. You do not monitor your thoughts constantly. You do not correct yourself every hour. You do not brace yourself for old fears. Instead, you move through your day with a quiet confidence that feels almost effortless. There is no urgency, no tension, no inner defense, no mental negotiation. It is like stepping into warm water after standing in the cold for years. At first, the warmth feels unfamiliar, almost unbelievable. But then, it becomes normal. And as the warmth becomes normal, the memory of cold slowly disappears. When you no longer argue with your old self, you have crossed the threshold. You are living in the new state. The shift is complete. This is why I say the old self dissolves by starvation. When you stop feeding it your attention, your fear, your effort, your resistance, it simply withers. And the new state, nourished by your acceptance, becomes the only reality you know. This is the true transformation, not dramatic, not violent, not filled with struggle, but quiet, natural, inevitable. The old self fades, the new self rises, and you find yourself living from a state that once seemed impossible, now as familiar as breathing. There is a moment, subtle, soft, almost whispered, when the law of assumption catches. It does not announce itself with fireworks, nor does it arrive with some mystical sensation that shakes the body. No, it comes quietly, like dawn seeping across the horizon, unnoticed until the whole sky is lit. And when this moment comes, you feel it not as excitement, not as anticipation, but as a gentle certainty that settles over you like a warm garment. This certainty is the sign, the unmistakable sign, that the assumption has taken root in consciousness. Before this moment, you may repeat the scene, you may enter the feeling, you may rehearse the end, but it still feels like imagination, like something you are doing. You are practicing it, cultivating it, nurturing it. But when the moment arrives, when the assumption stabilizes, It no longer feels like something you are doing. It feels like something you are. Let me explain how this works in the deepest psychological sense. Every desire begins with a sense of distance. You look at what you want and you feel the space between you and it. You sense the gap. You imagine the wish as something out there, beyond, ahead. This distance is the state of desire. Desire is not wrong, it is the starting point. But desire is not fulfillment. Desire still feels like longing. When the assumption of the wish fulfilled is not yet stable, you experience a back and forth. You have moments of feeling as though it is done, and moments of slipping back into the old state of not yet. You drift between faith and doubt, between fullness and emptiness, between possession and longing. And this drifting is normal in the early stages of the inner transformation. But then something happens. There comes a moment, sometimes after a week, sometimes after a single night, when the entire inner tone shifts. It is as if consciousness exhales, as if something within you finally says, "Yes, this is mine." And the desire stops feeling like desire. It stops being a future event. It stops being something you hope for, or reach for, or wait for. It becomes normal. This normality is the true sign that the assumption has taken root. When the wish fulfilled feels ordinary, natural, and present, rather than exciting and far away, the state is yours. I once had a student, a gentleman who desired a particular home. For months he imagined it, walked through its rooms in imagination, opened its windows, felt the sunlight on the imagined walls. But each time he finished the exercise, he confessed that he still felt outside the wish. He felt like a visitor, not the owner. The house felt like a dream, not a fact. But one evening, he returned to me with a different look in his eyes. Not exhilaration, but stillness. He said, "Neville, something strange has happened. The house no longer feels like something I want. It feels like something I have. I almost feel indifferent to it now." I told him that indifference is not lack of interest, it is fulfillment. For when the state is fully assumed, the emotional hunger dissolves. You do not crave what you already possess. You do not yearn for what is in your hand. You do not feel desire for what is already reality. That soft indifference is the sign. Another woman once told me that after months of imagining financial abundance, she awoke one morning and realized she felt absolutely no concern about money, not because her bank account had changed, but because her inner state had. She told me, "Neville, I am not excited about it anymore. I simply feel that money is a non-issue. It feels taken care of." And I said to her, "That is the moment your assumption caught. The desire has been replaced by identity." You see, when the assumption has taken root, the feeling shifts from wanting to being. The inner body relaxes. The breath deepens. The mind no longer asks when or how. Because the one who has does not ask such questions. The one who has simply lives, and life reorganizes itself around this new certainty. Let me explain what is happening internally. When you begin with desire, the state you occupy is "I want." When you imagine the wish fulfilled, you move toward the state "I have." But the early stages of imagination are like planting a seed. The soil must be pressed, the seed must be watered. You return again and again to the end, not through strain, but through gentle reenactment. And then, something within you accepts it. You feel it, you sense it, you know it, not intellectually, but experientially. The desire no longer feels like desire. It feels like memory. The wish no longer feels like wish. It feels like identity. The end no longer feels like future. It feels like now. I have often said, assumption, when persisted in, hardens into fact. But the hardening occurs long before the outer fact appears. The hardening is internal. It is the moment when the new state becomes the only natural state. Before the assumption takes root, the desire is vivid, emotional, charged. You feel excitement, yearning, anticipation. But after the assumption stabilizes, all of this melts away. Excitement turns into calm. Yearning turns into knowing. Anticipation turns into peace. This peace is the sign that the new state has replaced the old. A man once asked me, Neville, how do I know when my imagination has done its work? And I told him, when the desire loses its emotional pull, when it feels done, and you no longer crave it, when it feels like remembering rather than hoping. He said, Neville, wouldn't fulfillment feel exciting? And I answered, excitement belongs to the journey. Fulfillment belongs to the end. Fulfillment is quiet. Fulfillment is soft. Fulfillment is ordinary. Because the extraordinary becomes ordinary the moment you accept it as yours. I have seen this in countless students over the years. A woman who desired marriage told me one day that she felt no more longing. She felt instead as if she were already a wife in consciousness. The longing dissolved, not because she gave up, but because she had arrived. Her marriage came swiftly afterward. A man who desired a new business said he woke up one morning and felt no urgency to make anything happen. He simply felt as though the business existed already. The desire had become identity, and soon after, the outer circumstances appeared effortlessly. The signal is always the same. The desire stops feeling like desire. It becomes reality in consciousness. This is the moment it catches. This is the moment the seed breaks open beneath the soil. This is the moment the state stabilizes. This is the moment the outer world begins its inevitable rearrangement. If you are listening to this, I want you to understand something deeply. You do not need to force the assumption. You do not need to strain, nor push, nor demand. You only need to return to the end, gently, consistently, lovingly, until the inner man embraces it fully. And when he does, you will know it immediately. Not through signs, not through omens, not through outer change, but through the quiet shift within you, where longing dies and knowing takes its place. That moment is the true manifestation. The rest is simply the world catching up. There comes a moment on this path, a moment so quiet, so subtle, so unlike what you imagined, that you may miss it if you do not know what you're looking for. It is the moment when you no longer care, when the manifestation arrives. Not because you have given up, not because you are disappointed, but because you are full. Because the state itself has satisfied you. Because the end has already been accepted as present. This is the final sign. It is the moment when the desire loses its urgency, its tension, its sense of not yet. You find yourself walking through your day with a kind of gentle certainty, a quiet inner smile, an ease that has nothing to do with outer circumstances. You are not counting days. You are not waiting for anything. You are not checking, scanning, measuring. You are no longer living in anticipation. You are living in completion. When you no longer care, when it comes, the date is near. I want to make something very clear, for many misunderstand this point. This is not the cold indifference of someone who has stopped believing. This is not the apathy of defeat. This is not hopelessness masked as spirituality. No, this is a profound inner shift, a mystical calm, where the desire is no longer future. It is present in consciousness, and consciousness is the only reality. What you feel in consciousness is the event. The outer world is merely its echo. There was a man who once came to me and said, Neville, I finally understand. I no longer care if the money comes this week, or next month. But when he said this, I could feel the quiet in him. Not resignation, fulfillment. Not passivity. Ownership. He had entered the state of already having. And I told him, now it must come. Another woman told me, Neville, I feel as though the wedding has already happened. I do not feel anxious anymore. I do not feel lonely. I simply feel married. She said it with a serenity that needed no explanation. And soon after, the outer event materialized in a way she could never have scripted. This is the mystery. When you stop caring when, you have shifted into now. To care about the date is to imply the desire is still ahead of you. To care about the details is to imply the state is not yet yours. To wonder when it will happen is to confess it has not yet happened in imagination. But when the assumption has truly taken root, something changes, not in your effort, not in your outer life, but in your feeling. You begin to walk as though the desire were already behind you. You begin to breathe as though the solution were old news. You begin to live from a world where the thing is already accomplished, and so you feel no tension around its outer arrival. This is not denial. This is dominion. This is not waiting. This is existing in the fulfilled end. This is not hoping. This is knowing. The old self waits for the future. The new self lives from the accomplished fact. This is the moment in every great manifestation where time loses its grip on you. You no longer relate to time as a barrier or a condition. You simply allow the outer world to reveal, in its own perfect rhythm, what you have already accepted internally. The date no longer matters because the event in your consciousness is complete. When you no longer care about the date, you have stepped out of time. And when you step out of time, time bends toward you. There is nothing more mystical than this shift. It is the quiet recognition that nothing is coming, nothing needs to come, nothing is on its way. It already is. You begin to understand the true meaning of Scripture. Creation is finished. You begin to comprehend, not intellectually, but experientially, that every state already exists, fully formed, complete, waiting for your occupancy. And when you occupy it, the outer world must bring you the physical counterpart, not because it is coming, but because it already is. In this moment of deep acceptance, you stop living as the seeker and begin living as the one who has found. Your thoughts soften, your breath deepens, your inner world becomes still. You have ceased to chase the shadow and instead embrace the substance. This is the final sign, the highest sign. When you no longer care when it arrives, you are no longer waiting. You are being, and being is creation. Now you stand at the threshold of the physical manifestation, not because the world has changed, but because you have. The outer world will now bend, rearrange, and conspire in ways you cannot predict. But make no mistake, it is not bringing you anything new. It is simply revealing what you already accepted in consciousness. You do not wait for fulfillment. You carry fulfillment, and the world reflects it. This is the mystery all mystics have known. This is the secret buried in Scripture. This is the heart of the law of assumption. When the desire stops being desire and becomes identity, nothing can prevent its appearance. There is a doorway you may cross tonight, quietly, gently, without strain, if you will give yourself permission to enter it. I have called this doorway many names over the years, but the simplest is the most faithful. The state akin to sleep. Sates is not a technique you perform. It is a descent, a soft lowering of the outer man, a quiet rising of the inner one. It is the moment when the senses grow dim, when the world of fact dissolves into the world of imagination, and consciousness becomes malleable, like warm wax ready for the seal. Tonight, I want you to enter this state with me, slowly, carefully, as I guided my students in the 1950s. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, everything gentle, everything inevitable. Lie down or sit in a way that allows the body to release its insistence. Let the spine soften. Let the breath deepen without effort. Let the eyes grow heavy, not closed by force, but by invitation. You are not trying to sleep. You are drifting toward the threshold, the thin veil between waking and dreaming, where imagination is law. Now breathe slowly and feel the body begin to float. Each exhale loosens the grip of the old state. Each inhale draws you closer to the new one. Do not try to silence the mind. Let it become soft, like a distant radio fading into static. You are not here to wrestle with thoughts. You are here to relax above them. The thoughts will lose their urgency on their own. In this softened state, I want you to evoke a single micro-image, small, simple, effortless. Not the whole dream, not the entire outcome, not the grand finale. A micro-image. One scene that implies your wish is already fulfilled. If you desire money, imagine not piles of cash or complicated events. Imagine a single moment of having. Perhaps it is the feeling of closing a thick envelope, or holding a check, or glancing at a ledger with a balance that brings relief. Not the number, not the details, only the sensation. This is more than enough. If you desire freedom, imagine the sound of your breath, steady, unburdened. If you desire love, imagine a hand resting gently on yours. If you desire success, imagine the weight of a congratulatory letter in your palm. Choose the smallest possible moment that implies the entire fulfillment. Now take that micro image and bring it close, not visually at first, but emotionally. What does it feel like? Not what it looks like. What does it do inside your chest? How does your breath respond? What softens? What loosens? What rises? Let the feeling saturate you. Let the emotion paint the scene. You are not trying to see clearly. You are trying to feel truly. As you drift deeper into drowsiness, let your old self, your old identity, dissolve like mist in the warming sun. The you who was afraid, let him fade. The you who doubted, let her vanish. The you who counted pennies, feared bills, rehearsed lack, scanned the world for evidence, let that shadow self fall to the floor like an old garment. You are not dragging the old identity into the new state. You are leaving it behind at the threshold. Do not fight it. Do not push it. Do not reason with it. Just let it go limp, like a coat you no longer need in the warmth of the new world. Now return to the micro-image. Return to the feeling. Return to the quiet, knowing that the act is complete. In the 1950s, I guided my students like this, slow, unhurried, whispering them into new worlds. I would say to them what I say to you now. Feel yourself into the new state and fall asleep there. Do not try to maintain it. Do not try to hold on to it. Simply sink into it like one sinks into warm water. Let the feeling cradle you. Let the drowsiness deepen you. Let the new identity wear you like a skin. And as you drift, whisper, not aloud, but inwardly, this is real. This is mine. This is now, not with force, with certainty. Let the breath grow heavy. Let the body grow distant. Let the new state be the last impression upon the mind before sleep claims you. For what the mind accepts in that sacred borderland, the subconscious must obey. Tonight you will not beg. You will not plead. You will not hope. You will assume. And as you fall asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you will plant a seed that must rise in the physical world. For as I have told you across decades, your assumption when persisted in hardens into fact. And tonight, your new fact begins. There is a heaviness many men and women carry in silence, a weight they do not speak of openly, yet it follows them from childhood into adulthood, from early earnings into late years. It is the memory of lack, not lack in the outer world alone, but lack experienced so deeply that it carved grooves into consciousness. To change your financial destiny, you must understand this one truth. You are not reacting to money. You are reacting to memories of money. And those memories, unless revised, repeat themselves with astonishing fidelity. Tonight, I want to take you into the deepest chamber of the law, the chamber of revision, where past wounds are not merely healed, they are rewritten, where old poverty scenes lose their power, where emotional scars dissolve, where destiny unhooks itself from the past and roots itself in a new assumption. Sit quietly. Let the breath rest. Let the body sink. Let us begin. There was a woman who once attended my lectures in Los Angeles. She was brilliant, refined, gentle in spirit. Yet every year she found herself repeating the same pattern: unexpected bills, sudden expenses, lost opportunities, disappointments that seemed to rise out of nowhere. She believed she had a financial curse, but I told her, you do not have a curse, you have a memory she had never revised. A winter when her family could not pay rent, a moment when she watched her mother cry over bills, a day when she stood in a grocery store and heard the whispered embarrassment of not having enough. These memories were not in the past. They were living, breathing things in her imagination. She was not living from today. She was living from the echo of yesterday. This is what most people do. So tonight, I want you to revisit, not to relive, but to rewrite the old scenes of poverty that still whisper within you. Close your eyes softly. Allow one scene to emerge. not the worst one, not the most dramatic, just one. A simple, familiar moment from your past, where you felt lack. Perhaps you were told, "We can't afford that." Perhaps you counted coins in your youth. Perhaps you felt the sting of a declined purchase. Or perhaps you saw fear on the face of someone you loved. Do not resist the memory. Let it rise. Let it show itself to you. But this time, you are not entering as the wounded one. You enter as the operant power. See the scene begin to play. Let the characters move. Let the atmosphere form. Let the emotions arise. But you are no longer the one bound to the script. Now do what the world would call impossible. Change it. Right there, in the moment where you once felt fear, rewrite the event entirely. Where your mother cried, imagine her smiling. Where your father whispered, "We don't have enough," hear him say, "We have more than enough." Where you once felt the tension of scarcity, feel the ease of abundance spreading through the room like warm air. Let the entire scene shift, not gradually, but instantly. You do not negotiate with memory, you replace it. And as the scene transforms, notice how you transform inside it. You stand differently, you breathe differently, you feel differently. You are grafting a new emotional branch onto the tree of your life. This is revision. Most imagine the past as a dead trunk, rigid, unchangeable. But I tell you, the past is the root system of your present state. And roots can be cut, replaced, nourished, redirected. When you revise the memory, you alter the root, and the fruit must change accordingly. Imagine now that your life is a tree. Each memory is a branch. Some branches grew twisted through fear. Others grew weak through scarcity. You do not tear down the tree. You perform the ancient art of grafting. You take a living branch, an assumption of abundance, and graft it into the old wound. The tree does not resist. It accepts the new branch as its own and begins to grow in that direction. So it is with your consciousness. The past you revise becomes the seed of your future. The emotion you change becomes the soil of the present. You are not pretending. You are planting. Now breathe again, slowly. Return to that revised scene. Let the new version wash over you. Let the old version dissolve, disintegrate, lose all power. You have changed the memory. Therefore, you have changed its harvest. Do not underestimate what you have just done. For when you revise a memory of lack, you do more than rewrite a moment. You rewrite the identity formed by that moment. The woman I told you about revised a single afternoon from her childhood, when her parents whispered fearfully about rent. In her revision, they spoke calmly, joyfully, confidently about how beautifully things were unfolding. 3 weeks after beginning this nightly revision, she received an unexpected inheritance from a relative she had seldom spoken to. The amount was large enough to erase debts, fund opportunities, and create stability for the first time in her life. She believed the inheritance caused her relief. But I told her, "No, my dear, your relief caused the inheritance. That is the law. Now I want you to revise once more. Choose another small moment from your past. Perhaps one you have replayed many times without realizing it. Bring it gently to the surface, and again, rewrite it. See abundance instead of fear. Hear laughter where there was anxiety. Feel ease where there was discomfort. Each revision is a cut in the old root and a graft of a new one. When you revise a memory of poverty, you are declaring, "This is not my story any longer." When you revise moments of embarrassment or scarcity, you are saying, "That was never who I was." And when you revise deeply enough, long enough, faithfully enough, you come to discover something extraordinary. You were never poor. You only learned to feel poor. And what is learned can be unlearned. What was impressed can be replaced. What was once carved can be reshaped. Revision is not about the past. It is about liberating the present. And now, as you sit here, quiet, softened, tenderly aware, you may feel something shifting even now, a loosening, a lightness, a warmth in the chest that was not there before. That is the new branch taking root. And if you persist in this practice, revising nightly, rewriting memories until they no longer sting but strengthen, you will find that your destiny bends quietly, naturally, beautifully, toward abundance. For the past no longer leads you, it obeys you. When the inner state shifts, the outer world, quietly, obediently, faithfully, begins to rearrange itself. Not with thunder, not with spectacle, but with subtle movements, almost imperceptible at first, like the faint stirring of wind before dawn. Many people miss these early signs because they expect fireworks, dramatic events, sudden wealth, loud confirmation. But the law does not shout. It whispers, and only the one who has shifted within can hear its change outside. When your consciousness has assumed abundance, your world begins to tilt toward that assumption in ways that feel strangely gentle. A word someone says seems to stand out. A conversation overheard feels oddly relevant. A new idea drops into your mind with a clarity you cannot explain. You open a drawer and find an opportunity you once ignored. A person you have not spoken to in years crosses your path. A bill is lower than expected. A payment arrives earlier than usual. A stranger speaks in a way that touches something within you. The world is not sending signs. The world is matching your new state. I want you to understand this deeply. You are not receiving coincidences. You are experiencing correspondence. Let me tell you how this works in consciousness. When you assume a new state of being, truly assume it, the world does not instantly change before your eyes. Instead, a bridge of incidents forms, a sequence of events, both small and large, that leads you from where you appear to be to where you truly are in consciousness. This bridge is not random. It is not accidental. It is not separate from you. It is you, externalized. Every conversation, every delay, every idea, every encounter is part of the unfolding of your assumption. But here is the tragedy of so many who come to me. They chase these incidents. They try to interpret every small event as a sign the universe is pleased or displeased, or testing them, or guiding them. They exhaust themselves looking for meaning in each little thing, and in doing so they reveal one painful truth. They have not fully assumed the state. For when the assumption is complete, you no longer chase signs. You no longer search for confirmation. You simply walk the bridge. You live your days naturally, peacefully, with the quiet confidence that everything unfolding is taking you where you already are in consciousness. Do not chase the bridge of incidents. Walk it. I remember a man who once stood in front of me after a lecture in New York. He said, "Neville, something curious is happening. People I haven't spoken to in years are contacting me. I overhear conversations about finances everywhere I go. Opportunities seem to appear from unexpected corners. But I do not understand what it means." And I told him, "It means your world is moving. It means your assumption has begun its work. It means the seed you planted is rising, breaking the soil." He asked, "Should I follow these signs? Should I analyze them?" I said, "No. Simply walk. These movements are not messages to decipher. They are steps on the bridge. Your only task is to remain in the state and allow the world to do what it must. And this is what I want you to know tonight. When the world begins to shift around you, do not praise the signs. Do not worship the coincidences. Do not cling to the early movements like a thirsty traveler grasping at the first drop of rain. These are not the destination. They are merely the rearrangements necessary for your assumption to become visible. Let me give you an image. Imagine a great stage production, a play about to begin. Before the curtain rises, you hear the faint scraping of props, the rustling of curtains, the soft footsteps of actors moving into place. This is not the performance. This is the preparation. Your world is the stage. Your assumption is the script. These coincidences, these synchronicities, these subtle shifts are simply the stagehands preparing the scene of your new life. Why would you concern yourself with the shifting of props when you know the play is already written? When the inner shift is real, the outer world becomes harmonious, not instantly transformed, but aligned. It is as though the world is bending to make your new identity feel at home. Doors open effortlessly. Closed paths reveal hidden entrances. People respond to you differently without knowing why. Ideas come with a clarity you cannot attribute to logic. Your timing improves. Your intuition sharpens. But you are not to glorify these movements. You are not to interpret them as omens. You are not to cling to them. You are simply to continue walking, steadily, calmly, knowing that everything happening is part of the bridge that leads you from the state you once occupied to the state you now inhabit. The old self wants to chase. The new self does not need to, for the new self knows, I am already there. Once, during a winter in New York, a student asked me why the world seemed to speed up after she assumed her new state. She said, Neville, it feels as if everything around me is accelerating. Conversations feel significant. People mention things I had been imagining. Unexpected help comes. It all feels choreographed, and I told her, of course it does. It is choreographed. Your consciousness is the choreograph. The bridge of incidents is not a mystery to fear. It is not a puzzle to decode. It is the unfolding of your assumption in perfect order. Do not rush it. Do not resist it. Do not scrutinize it. Walk it. And as you walk, you will notice something remarkable. Your emotional reactions begin to soften. You no longer panic at delays. You no longer despair at obstacles. You no longer cling to outcomes. You move with a calm assurance, knowing that every event, pleasant or unpleasant, is an essential part of the fulfillment. For the bridge is wise. The bridge is perfect. The bridge is inevitable. You assumed abundance, so abundance must appear. But you must not stand still, peering anxiously at the horizon, waiting for the final scene. You must live. You must walk. You must allow the world to move. Tonight I tell you, when the world begins to shift around you, when coincidences multiply, when conversations echo your inner state, when ideas arrive fully formed, when paths open gently and quietly before you, do not chase them. Step into them, walk forward, and let the bridge carry you home. There comes a moment, quiet, unforced, unmistakable, when a man or woman realizes they are no longer trying to become abundant. They are abundant, not because the outer world has changed yet, but because they have. It is a moment not of excitement, but of recognition, not of striving, but of settling, not of preparation, but of embodiment. You do not become ready. Readiness becomes you. It descends upon you like a warm cloak, laid gently over your shoulders. You did not reach for it. You did not chase it. You simply awakened one morning and realized, I am no longer the one who waits. This moment is subtle, yet its authority is absolute. And tonight, I want to help you recognize its signs, not in a list, not in bullet points, but as a living narrative of transformation felt from within. There is first the quietness, that strange inner stillness that arrives without reason. You wake and feel no urgency, no tension, no compulsion to push or to hurry. The desire that once felt distant now rests in you like a completed memory. Then there is the softening of effort. Where once you rehearsed affirmations with discipline, now the words feel unnecessary. They do not arise because they are no longer needed. The state has become natural, like breathing. You notice the absence of the old self, the one who feared, the one who checked the bank account, the one who sought signs and begged heaven for reassurance. That self does not appear anymore, not because you fought it off, but because it has nothing to cling to. The ground has shifted beneath it. You become aware of a new inner dignity, a quiet confidence not born of intellect or will, but of identity. You feel as though you are walking not towards something, but from it, from the accomplished fact. There is a moment, too, when you stop thinking in the future tense. You do not say, when I have money, or when abundance arrives, but something in you whispers, it is mine now. And this is not bravado. It is not delusion. It is not wishful thinking. It is the natural language of the new state speaking through you. Another sign, the relief that has no cause. You feel lighter, freer, as though some invisible burden has been lifted, yet nothing in the outer world has changed. This is the unmistakable mark that the subconscious has accepted your new identity. Consciousness moves first. Reality follows. There is also the dissolving of inner debate. You no longer argue with yourself. You no longer negotiate with doubt. You no longer bargain with time. The old internal parliament falls silent. No opposition remains. You catch yourself acting differently, not dramatically, but simply, naturally. You walk slower. You breathe deeper. You choose with greater certainty. You speak with quiet assurance. You are not pretending. You are becoming. And slowly, the realization dawns. I am not ready because conditions allow it. I am ready because I am the condition. You do not wait for the outer world to validate your readiness. You do not consult circumstance. You do not measure progress. Readiness is not a conclusion you reach. It is a garment you discover you are already wearing. It settles on you with the same gentle inevitability. As night becomes dusk, sometimes the realization arrives during a small moment. Washing your hands, closing a door, stepping out into the evening air, and you feel, without drama, I am no longer becoming, I have become. It is like tasting a fruit and finding it sweet without knowing when it ripened. You did not watch the process. You simply encountered the conclusion. There is nothing to announce, nothing to proclaim. You do not tell others. You do not even tell yourself. You simply feel the truth of it. And when readiness becomes you, the world begins to treat you according to the state you now occupy, automatically, quietly, effortlessly. I speak to you now with the same tone I used in the halls of New York and Los Angeles, with the same paternal gentleness I offered those who sat before me. My dear, if you feel these shifts, if you recognize these movements within yourself, then you are ready. Not because you have done enough, or waited enough, or proven enough, but because the state has taken you in. You entered the mansion, closed the door behind you, and the world must now adjust to the occupant you have become. Readiness is not something you strive for. It is something you notice. And when you notice it, you may smile quietly to yourself, for you will know what only a few ever understand. Nothing is coming. It already is. There comes a moment in this great unfolding where abundance is no longer something you imagine or pursue or hope for. It becomes the self you walk with, not a mask, not an affirmation, not a temporary mood, but an identity, quiet, dignified, effortless. Tonight I want to take you not into a technique, not into a method, but into the being of the wealthy self, into the consciousness that no longer pleads or reaches, but possesses. For wealth, as I have told you across the years, is not money. It is a state of consciousness. Money is but one of its shadows. Let us begin. There is a version of you who does not strain, who does not panic, who does not calculate from fear, who does not shrink when faced with opportunity, who does not clutch at coins as though they were life rafts. This self is not loud. It does not announce itself. It rises quietly, like dawn spreading across the inner sky. And when this self takes over, you notice first a change in your thinking. You no longer ask, how will I manage this? You ask, what do I choose? Your thoughts no longer race ahead in panic or spiral into worst-case imaginings. They move slowly, deliberately, like someone who already knows the answer. The wealthy self does not think in desperation. It thinks in decision. A poor man thinks in survival. A wealthy man thinks in selection. When the wealthy state becomes your home, your inner dialogue softens. There is nothing left to chase, nothing left to prove, nothing left to defend. Your mind works like a calm river, steady, deep, unhurried. Next, you notice a difference in your choices. Where once you chose out of fear, fear of losing, fear of lack, fear of judgment, you now choose out of alignment. You select what feels consistent with the self you have become. You say yes, not because you are afraid no will cost you something, but because yes matches your inner dignity. You say no without guilt, without nervousness, without explanation. The wealthy self does not justify itself. It simply moves. Then comes a shift in your actions. You stop delaying. You stop second-guessing. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You act from a sense of inevitability, not urgency. A man who feels wealthy does not act like a man hoping to be wealthy. He walks differently. He speaks differently. He breathes differently. His shoulders are not raised in tension. His chest is not tight. His jaw is not clenched. There is space inside him. Room for breath, room for timing, room for inspiration. He does not behave like a beggar approaching life. He behaves like a giver, not because he tries to be generous, but because abundance flows naturally outward from the state he occupies. I tell you tonight, you are no longer the beggar. You are the giver. Not because you have money in hand, but because you have wealth in consciousness. When the wealthy self becomes you, it transforms your emotional landscape. Fear becomes curiosity. Scarcity becomes imagination. Pressure becomes possibility. You begin to feel that life is not happening to you. It is happening through you. This feeling is subtle. It does not arrive with fanfare. It arrives with the quiet recognition, I am the cause, not the effect. Now I want you to imagine, not as a technique, but as an identification, what it would feel like to live as this wealthy self for a single day. Imagine waking in the morning without dread, with no urgency, no knot in the stomach, no list of worries pressing your chest. Imagine rising with a sense of ease, as though the day is already arranged in your favor. Imagine preparing your tea or your breakfast without glancing nervously at bills, without budgeting your emotions, without rehearsing old fears. Imagine moving through your home with the calm assurance that everything you desire is already unfolding. No rush, no grasping, no waiting. Now imagine stepping outside and sensing the world respond to you differently. People speak with more warmth. Opportunities come in softer ways. Ideas arrive as if placed gently in your mind, not because the world has changed, but because you have. The wealthy self emits a different vibration, not loud, not forceful, not aggressive, but stable. This stability is magnetic. It draws to you the circumstances that match your inner poise. Now consider how this self makes financial decisions, not from fear of losing, but from confidence in receiving, not from the memory of past lack, but from the feeling of present fullness, not from the anxiety of what if, but from the knowing of I am. This wealthy self is not reckless, it is not indulgent, it is not careless, it is secure. Security is the true wealth. Money without security is anxiety. Security without money is poverty. Security within consciousness creates both. Let the wealthy self become flesh in your imagination for a moment. See how it stands, tall but not rigid, relaxed but not passive, aligned but not strained. Hear how it speaks, gently, clearly, calmly, without over-explaining, without apologizing for existing. Feel how it interprets the world, not as threat, but as canvas, not as battlefield, but as garden, not as test, but as mirror. And most beautifully, the wealthy self loves. It loves generously, naturally, without fear of running out. This love is not sentimental, it is not needy, it is the love that arises from fullness, not lack. A beggar asks, "Do you love me?" A wealthy self declares, "I love you, for it has something to give." When you embody this self, you no longer manipulate, bargain, or plead for affection. You attract because you are attractive, not in appearance, but in consciousness. You become magnetic because your state is whole. Now I want you to bring this wealthy self closer, not as a character you admire, but as a self you recognize. This is not someone you are trying to become. This is someone you have always been, covered only by the shadow of past assumptions. Peel away the shadow. Let the original self rise. Feel it inhabit your breath. Feel it settle into your posture. Feel it whisper into your thoughts. I am enough. I am full. I am the source, not the seeker. Let this identity become natural, so natural that trying to return to the old state feels impossible. The wealthy self is not a fantasy. It is not a dream. It is not a future version of you. It is the truth of you, revealed the moment you stop identifying with lack. This truth does not demand belief. It demands surrender. You surrender the small self, the frightened self, the begging self, and you rise naturally into the state of the one who already has. This is the wealthy self, calm, generous, certain, creative, peaceful, aligned with the God within. It does not reach for abundance. It radiates abundance. It does not chase opportunity. It creates opportunity. It does not wait for conditions. It generates conditions. You are this self the moment you cease to contradict it. Tonight, if you will close your eyes, relax your breath, and allow yourself to feel, not imagine but feel, what it is to be the wealthy one. You will step into a mansion of consciousness you have always owned, and once you enter, the world must treat you as its resident, not because the world has power over you, but because your state commands the world. You are no longer the beggar, you are the giver. You are no longer asking, you are embodying. You are no longer hoping, you are being, and being is the law. There comes a moment in every true act of creation when nothing more needs to be said, nothing more needs to be proven, nothing more needs to be asked. The inner shift is the sign, not the outer movement, not the changing of circumstances, not the arrival of money, not the turning of events, but the quiet, unmistakable rearrangement within you. Tonight, you have walked with me through the deep corridors of consciousness, through the signs, the states, the dissolving of the old self, the rising of the wealthy identity, the silence of the begging mind, the certainty that has no physical cause. If you have felt anything within yourself, a softening, a release, a loosening, a breath that came easier, a small but real spark of recognition, then hear me now. It is done. You felt the shift, therefore it is done. The shift is not a prelude to manifestation. The shift is manifestation in its first and truest form. Outer events are merely the echo, the shadow cast by the new state you now occupy. In all my years speaking in the great halls of New York and Los Angeles, I told my students the same truth. When you feel the change within, you need not look for the result outside. The result is already appointed. And so I tell you now, with that same quiet certainty of the 1950s lectern, if your breath settled tonight, if peace touched you where fear once lived, if the future seemed closer, if the present seemed lighter, if your inner speech grew gentler, if you felt, even faintly, that you are no longer the one who waits, the work is finished. You have crossed the threshold. You have entered the mansion. You have stepped into the end, and the world must now reflect the end you inhabit. Do not rush. Do not strain. Do not chase. Do not question. The God within you has already moved. The outer world simply has not caught up to your declaration. Remember, all manifestation is delayed only by perception, never by law. You stand now in that holy interval between assumption and appearance, and the only appropriate response is gratitude and rest. Let your tomorrow be light. Let your decisions be calm. Let your actions be natural. Let your thoughts be simple. You need not prove your new identity. You need not protect it. You need not defend it. Be still in it, for stillness is the true mark of faith. And as the silence settles upon you now, I offer you the blessing with which I closed many of my old conferences, a phrase carried from Scripture into the living practice of consciousness. May this night be counted unto you for righteousness. For righteousness, as I have taught you, is not moral purity, it is right consciousness. It is the correct placement of the I am. It is the alignment between desire assumed and identity accepted. Tonight, you have aligned. Tonight, you have assumed. Tonight you have entered the new state. And so I say once more, gently, firmly, without drama, you felt the shift. Therefore it is done. Rest now in the fulfillment. Let the world rearrange itself. All things are yours, for consciousness is God, and God has already moved on your behalf. I thank you for walking with me, and may the state you have entered tonight rise around you in perfect order, in perfect timing, in perfect ease. Good night.